Thank you to everyone joining today from across the country and around the world. I'm Anna Stokes, Vice President of Marketing and Communications here at Conscious Capitalism Inc. On behalf of the entire CCI team, we appreciate you taking the time to learn and grow in community with us. Today, we are joined by representatives of our Atlanta chapter, Shannon Gill, Soyini Coke, Deke Cateau, and to take a deep dive into conscious leadership. As many of you know, conscious capitalism is a philosophy that emphasizes the human nature of business, as well as a movement of business leaders from around the world working to change the practice and perception of capitalism as a means to elevate humanity. Conscious Capitalism Inc. is a nonprofit organization dedicated to catalyzing that movement by creating learning opportunities like today's session and building systems of support for practicing conscious capitalists through our Senior Leader Network membership and engagement with our local chapters. Several times a month, we offer virtual gatherings as a way for the community to see how this philosophy takes shape in the leadership journeys and business practices of those in our network. And each quarter, we are excited to be working closely with our chapters to highlight the 4 tenets of conscious capitalism. Today, our focus is on the tenet of conscious leadership. Today's gathering will run for about 45 minutes. I will provide a very brief overview of conscious leadership and also give you a slide deck to bring that learning back to your own conscious practice after today's session. And then I'll invite Shannon Gill, board member and program chair at our Atlanta chapter, to lead the rest of today's discussion with our guests. They will be in conversation for about 25 minutes, and then we'll transition to audience questions during the last 10 to 15 minutes of our session. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can during our time together. If you have any technical issues or difficulties, please reach out to info@consciouscapitalism.org. So before our speakers dive into how conscious leadership in action shows up for them, we want to take a few minutes to give you a frame for that discussion. So conscious leadership is one of the 4 tenets of conscious capitalism, which is a philosophy and movement of leaders that believe business is a powerful force for good in our world. Today, we're going to focus on conscious leadership, but everything is connected to create your conscious business, with each tenet helping to frame the others. The other tenets to keep top of mind are higher purpose, or the why of your business beyond just profits, stakeholder orientation, or creating mutually beneficial relationships across all groups your business touches, and conscious culture, or the intentionally developed social fabric of a company that promotes the organization's purpose and values. So as a conscious leader, you become the standard bearer for your company's higher purpose, ensuring that your purpose touches each stakeholder group and is ever present in your culture. Conscious leaders are committed to finding solutions that create care and value for all stakeholders. Without better leaders, there is no better world. Conscious leaders come from all experiences, walks of life, and personal identities. And while there is a great diversity in a conscious leader's personal and professional path, there are certain qualities present, embraced, and cultivated by those leaders. Conscious leaders display a sophisticated emotional intelligence, combining a deep empathy and understanding of others with an acute self-awareness and knowledge of oneself. They approach their work with heart and care, creating inclusive environments by bringing their whole selves to work as an enthusiastic and loving human being. Conscious leaders bring a deep moral character founded in an abiding integrity and ethical behavior while maintaining flexibility to create win-win-win scenarios. All of this is underpinned by an orientation to the future rather than a focus on mitigating short-term risk. Conscious leaders have the ability to see how the parts of the whole will be influenced by each other through a systems-minded approach and long-term orientation. And while conscious leaders are strong by necessity to stay the course of their higher purpose, even when it's hard, they also show vulnerability that helps to facilitate the human connection that will make them better leaders. We've put together several examples of conscious leadership from our community that we invite you to take a closer look at after this call. They really underscore how conscious leadership is a very personal journey while reinforcing the presence of those qualities we saw in the previous slide across personal identities, industry, and company geography. We turn first to Cint Marshall, the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks, who teaches us that leading with integrity and character has the power to introduce higher purpose in spaces that were previously solely focused on profits and product. Cint really underscores the importance of bringing your personal story and background to the table as a leader and to seek opportunities for impact in all you do. She also urges inclusive leaders to treat diversity, equity, and inclusion as a business strategy rather than just an aspect of community outreach, calling for a diverse leadership table to make this work truly impactful across stakeholders. Next, we have Shane Jackson, president of Jackson Healthcare, who's asking business leaders to leverage their influence for good. Shane invites leaders to empathize deeply with the immense impact their words and actions can have on the daily lives and well-being of their team members. And he encourages leaders to know when to get out of the way and make space for the experts on their team to do the problem solving. Shane frames that ultimately a leader's legacy will be defined by what they have done for others through their influence rather than what affluence they have created for themselves. And finally, we take a look at how Melanie Debecca, the CEO of Tarani, overcame a significant growth hurdle by embracing her own learning journey. Melanie talks about how when Tarani was about to tip over over $5 million in annual revenue, they realized the team that had got them there wasn't necessarily the team to get them to the next level. As a result, Melanie leveraged her networks and created new ones to connect herself to other business leaders who were leading businesses of the size, scale, and shared values that Tarani aspired to become. She positioned herself as a student with much to learn and an enthusiasm to continue to get herself to that next level of leadership. Melanie approached her personal growth and the eventual development and transition of her top leadership team with a long-term lens, seeking to be transformative rather than transactional. So if you're just starting out on your conscious journey, or if you're diving more deeply into your leadership work, we invite you to take some time after this meeting to reflect on the questions on this slide as a possible starting point. And if you're already pretty advanced in your conscious practice, we know you're committed to lifelong learning and reflection. So perhaps these questions can spark new ideas and support your continued evolution. And of course, the team at Conscious Capitalism Inc. is here to help you on your conscious journey as well. We invite you to continue to explore our organization through our senior leader network, local chapters, events and resources, and the stories we tell about your conscious peers. Now I'd like to hand it over to Shannon Gill, who will get the conversation started with our guest speakers. Shannon, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Anna. I so appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to welcome Soyini and Deek. But before I introduce our esteemed speakers, I want to share a little bit about our chapter. The Atlanta chapter was founded in 2017. We currently have over 1,200 people on our mailing list for participants. And we've actually been adopting the new CCI chapter model. So what that means is we have a chapter advisory board of senior leaders who work with us on the leadership team to work on the programming and how the Atlanta chapter will evolve. We also have started having invitation-only senior leader events, trying to build out that senior leader community. Both Soyini and Deek have been involved with our chapter for several years. Soyini actually hosts a radio show called CEO Exclusive, where she's interviewed over 400 CEOs, 40% of them from the Inc. 5000. And during those interviews, some of her guests were talking about conscious capitalism. And that got her curious about what is this thing of conscious capitalism? And she became more involved with our chapter. And now she actually has moderated several events for us, including a really successful one last week, which was fantastic. We just loved it. Soyini is also the managing principal at Annona Enterprises. They're a strategic advisory firm on healthcare and culture. Deke Cateau has also been involved with the Atlanta chapter. He's appeared on a panel for our chapter along with Raj Sisodia when we're talking about the book, The Healing Organization. Deke is also the CEO at AG Rhodes, which is a nonprofit organization operating nursing homes in the metro Atlanta area. With more than 20 years of experience in long-term care, Deke is passionate about fostering greater understanding of and appreciation for the ongoing aging population. And he's built a career in conscious leadership. So Soyini and Deek, we are so excited to have you both here with us today. And I'm going to hand it over to you for this amazing conversation on conscious leadership.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And it's always a pleasure to serve and to work with the Atlanta Capitalism Chapter. Deek.
Hello, everyone. Hello, happy to be here as well. Thank you, Soyini. It's my pleasure to be here.
Deek, when we first met a few years ago, I actually met you as the COO of AG Rhodes, which for those of you viewing who don't know, AG Rhodes is the oldest nursing home in Georgia and one of the oldest in the country. You were COO, and I got to know you as a brand new CEO, and you've really been through the fire, as you talk about in your new book. So I would love for you to tell us just the story of the past few years as you have been at the epicenter of the pandemic. And now let's all hope, and pray that the worst of it is behind us. But I think that I imagine that your leadership must have been tested. And so share with us just the story of what's happened over the past few years, just to open the conversation.
Yeah, thank you again. So you need to back up a little bit. So I did become CEO of AG Rhodes in 2018. And 2 years in, almost to the day, is when COVID first hit our nursing homes, first hit our nation's nursing homes. And that changed my life forever, and definitely the lives of many forever. I vividly remember waking up, it was February 28th, 2020, and waking up to the news that the COVID virus was found in a nursing home in the United States, in Washington State. And my heart just dropped, and I knew we were in for it then. I could not imagine, though, how much we were in for it. Not really me, but for my staff on the front lines, the frontline workers, who we are now calling essential, who thankfully many of us always knew were essential. They have been through it. I don't think many people realize that nursing homes really was ground zero for the COVID-19 virus. Most deaths in this nation occurred in nursing homes. It's estimated up to a quarter of the deaths in the United States occurred in nursing homes. And quite honestly, a lot of that is just because of the vulnerable populations that we take care of. So this is something that affected us greatly, not only residents, but our staff, whose lives now were on the line and were at risk as well. And that's what we've been living the last 2 years. We've had to be very, very tactical. And as leaders, we've had to be extremely supportive, not just of our residents, our patients, but also of our frontline staff who, what I akin them going through is PTSD. They literally are going through what is very, very similar to the mental and emotional stresses of post-traumatic stress disorder.
So Deek, what are a few or maybe one of the most difficult decisions that you had to make during the pandemic?
Yeah, there have been several very difficult ones. One, I would say the first difficult one was when we shut our homes down to the public. Extremely difficult one, literally locking off loved ones to their family members who lived in nursing homes. And that was to contain the spread of the illness. It was that prevalent and that dangerous, and we saw it all around us. So that was an extremely difficult one. The other decision that I point individuals to that was not so ethically difficult as it was practically difficult was my organization when we made the decision to fully mandate vaccines for way before it was federally done by the government. Again, it was an easy moral and ethical decision, but it was a decision that we knew we would lose staff going and doing it, and it was a decision that we knew was so still controversial. And we made that decision by October 1st of last year. But we've gotten through it, and we're now 100% vaccinated. But it was a very difficult decision to get to.
And as you were making these decisions, what were some of the guiding, your internal guidance system that that allowed you to make what now seems obvious to be the right decisions, but at the time may not have been?
Yes, so most decisions made, were not made in a vacuum by any means. They were not decisions that were made by me without strong consultation, meeting with staff. I continued through COVID to have town hall meetings with staff and engage them on so many things, so many of these decisions. So I would say they were definitely made with staff and patients and residents in mind. They were made in strong consultation with my senior team, my management team. But overall, I would say, and I mentioned it earlier, I would say my ethical or moral compass guided most of them. They were decisions that, although difficult, we knew if they were not made, the alternative would be a lot worse, Soyini. So that was the easing part of it, but they were definitely decisions that we had to involve all stakeholders in discussions about.
One of the things that you just touched on, which has certainly been in the press a lot, is just how worn out, like really worn out, everybody who is in healthcare and in particular nursing homes are, and the PTSD.
Yeah.
So how has that changed your leadership, and how are you kind of going into, now that we're going into the much longer stretch of dealing with the fallout of all of that emotional wear and tear? How has that changed your approach to leadership?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about empathy. I would say I have become a much more empathetic leader. I have become much more in touch with the feelings of my team, of my staff.
Feelings!
Yeah.
You said feelings, right?
And with my feelings too. These are very, very emotional issues and topics we're dealing with, whether staff want to come to work or not. We've seen mass exodus of our workforce. And it's easy to sit by and judge and say, you guys knew what you were getting into. You guys are being paid for this. But walk a mile in someone's shoes, and you have no choice but to have that empathy for them, because they have families at home that they need to take care of. They have loved ones at home that they need to take care of. And quite honestly, they're put at immense risk in many of these environments. So, I've kind of had to take my boss hat off, and just think of them as individuals, like you said, who have lives, who have families, who breathe, who, just like you and I, and put yourself in their shoes. And it's a humbling thing to do, I'll tell you. But it's so much more helpful at the end of it, because it helps you to get to that final line, or to get to the next point, understanding that, hey, this is not being done under any malice, under any hate. This is really us just being more in touch with our staff, our stakeholders, our residents, and their feelings.
So what's an example of one of the places where you've seen your empathy kind of expand, where you maybe were not showing as much empathy before, but you're showing more empathy now?
Yeah, so the biggest example I use is the whole idea of staffing of our workforce. I'm almost ashamed to say, but I'm not the only one. I think back to not too long ago, when we had CNAs, LPNs, direct caregivers, coming into nursing homes with children in hands to fill out an application, with children in hand because they probably did not have adequate childcare. And for me as a leader then, that was a red flag. So this person's coming in to fill out an application with kids in hand. So the red flag is, maybe this is not going to be a reliable staff member, because they will be calling out from work, due to childcare issues. My view on that has completely changed. And again, I'm kind of ashamed of my view on it before, because now we understand that person has to live. That person obviously, may have had child issues then, but my job as a leader is to work with that individual, is to understand that individual is a human being outside of my nursing homes. That person is a human being, and to adopt policies and procedures that allow that person to live. whether that be flexibility on times of coming to work. COVID has done that to all of us and all of our industries. We didn't believe we could operate with that level of flexibility. Now we have to. So I would say that's the biggest one, that it's really brought that level of humanity out of not just me. I'm one of the few who's probably willing to admit it, and be ashamed in admitting that was my thinking before. But proud to say now that I think I'm getting it.
Well, I think the evolution is obvious as well. That part of being a conscious leader is being willing to evolve and to admit the places where you have more consciousness now, you have more awareness now that you didn't have before. So thank you for that. One thing that I think, just in terms of specific tactics for folks who might be listening or viewing, it was very interesting when we spoke before. I was very impressed about some of the specific benefits and the generosity of AG Rhodes. At the time, I remember when we spoke before, you had a pension. It's like, who has a pension? Like, and things like that. And at the time, you also had the tenure and the duration of your staff at AG Rhodes, which I think goes to like the care of having a pension, was much higher than the average in the industry. So how has that evolved? And, how are you doing with regard to staff turnover, which was one of your kind of big claims to fame before?
Yeah, we are certainly not doing as well as we did. And again, I attribute a lot of that to COVID. A lot of these high tenured staff are leaving the workforce for some of the reasons we discussed earlier. And us as an organization are continuing to think of ways to make our staff know that they are our secret sauce. I think they are the forgotten stakeholder. And I think COVID has brought that smack dab on many organizations. We as an industry have a mantra, and we've discussed this already, but we have a mantra that the resident or the patient is always right. And it's a mantra that comes out of consumerism, which I completely get. But by promoting that mantra, we have forgotten probably the most important stakeholder after, which is our staff. It reminds me of the mantra we have at home where we say happy life, happy life. It's similar in a nursing home setting. If you take care of your staff, you can go home and sleep at night, and they will take care of your residents. So we've realized that, and we've tried through our compensation strategies. We like most people did COVID bonuses during the high points of COVID, but we came to the realization when we came to the low points, when we didn't have high rates or incidences of COVID, we couldn't take that money away from staff that have gotten accustomed to it. What kind of standard is that? And that brought us to raise our minimum at great expense to a small organization, an expense that we still don't know how we're going to get through it. But we raised our minimum wage for direct caregivers in direct response to that. We have since looked at ways to not only acknowledge our staff, but acknowledge their families. We've set up a scholarship program for children and grandchildren of our staff members. And we continue to try to think of ways to show them that we care for them, and kind of flip that mantra that the resident is always right. No one's always right? Just like no one's always wrong. But really show them how much we appreciate them and how much we're concerned about them as a primary stakeholder to the successful operation of any nursing home.
So as you think about moving forward and trying to attract new talent and attract new staff, what are some of the kind of philosophies and things that you've learned over these past few years that you think are going to be helpful moving forward?
One of the biggest one is our emerging workforce, whether you call them millennials, whatever title you want to give them, are not motivated by the same things that some of these legacy workforce folks we just spoke about are or were motivated by. What we're finding is the flexibility of giving them flexibility in scheduling their shifts is extremely important. What we are finding is a lot of these compensation plans that we had, like the pension plan, which a lot of the legacy people love. A lot of our newer workforce rather to be paid more now and them be able to plan for their retirement themselves, them be able to, whether they're going to invest or not, they be able to do that. It's difficult for us to do, but we are learning that it's a completely different expectation of this workforce. And whereas we were beating our heads on desks for years, trying to convert that newer workforce into our older legacy expectations, we need to stop and listen to them. And that's kind of the flux period we're in now. We're really in that period of listening to them. How can we make this more marketable and industry for them to come to work in? Because if we don't do that, not just nursing homes, healthcare on the whole would be in trouble. Because I could tell you right now, you can probably go work in the retail industry right now for as much as you could work for in a lot of our healthcare settings. The difference with the retail industry and us that I tell folks is they could raise the price of their goods and services, right, to increase pay for their staff. We're kind of stuck as organizations that depend mainly on government funding. We can't do that. So we have to become more innovative in creating a culture of an organization where someone wants to work. I saw that in the slide earlier. That is the number one reason people are going to come to work for you, is if your organization has created that culture of belonging that people want to come to work in. Peter Drucker was absolutely right. One of my favorite quotes, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I'm going to add lunch and dinner, because we have to create those environments of culture that people want to come work for.
Mm-hmm. So with you as the leader and now pivoting and seeing that the culture that you had isn't gonna work for the workforce, connect some of the dots for us around your leadership and how you had that epiphany personally, and like you're shifting, and now you have to shift all of the people who've been there, who were, like you said, they're the bedrock of why you've been so great and why you've had longevity. And now these legacy people have to interact with the younger people who they probably don't approve of. I know some of the talk about millennials, right? And trying to kind of mush this, the culture and the things together to come up with something that's going to be new. Connect some of the dots for us around that.
Ooh, it's hard to connect, and it's difficult. I'll give you an example. Last Friday, I spent the better part of an hour meeting with a direct caregiver who reached out to me via email directly, and was very upset with some things related to compensation and pay. And I said, I'll come down to the building and I'll meet with you. So we met for about an hour. Very long discussion. The genesis of it was they were upset that newer employees coming into the workplace were coming in at a certain wage. And when they came in, they didn't come in at that wage. And they didn't think it was enough of a gap between the legacy individuals, which some of which was true. But very early on in that conversation, I realized there was not a right or wrong to this conversation. It was a simple, complete difference of opinions and of, I don't want to say selfishness, but of individuals thinking of themselves, rather than thinking of the organization as a whole. And that's where I go back to that understanding, or that cultivating of a culture. I do something called town halls once a quarter, and the first thing I realize is I got to, or someone from our organization has to do this more frequently. We need to have more frequent touch points with our staff on the front lines. This is not a time for me to sit up in my office here now, where I'm speaking to you now from. This is a time for us as leaders to be on the front lines with the staff, talking to them, engaging with them, trying to mesh those two cultures together for the end result, which would be AG Rhodes going into 117 more years. We've been here for 117. For us to get to 117 more, we got to marry those two together. So it's a difficult time to do it. I don't have all the dot connections, but I know it's going to be connected by leaders getting out of their glass offices, their silver towers, their golden palaces, and meeting the staff where they are and talking with the staff where they are. We call them our care partners. The way to show care partnership is to come to them and show them that you're willing to partner with them for their care. Mm-hmm. And to own the difficult repercussions. So that conversation I had Friday, I had to own it. I understand how you feel, but explain why this is a move the organization had to take, and explain that this is for our industry to be sustained going forward.
Mm-hmm. Understood. I think maybe as my final question, one of the things I would love for you to just weigh in on is, as I'm hearing you, Deke, one of the things I'm impressed by is how not glamorous being a CEO is. On TV we see Jeff Bezos and Mike, the CEO of Microsoft, whose name escapes me right now, the richest man in the world. I don't know why I can't think of it, but Bill Gates, right? We see all, it's so glamorous being a CEO, and one of the things that's I'm really kind of impressed by is it's really not that glamorous. It's so if you want to weigh in, I think for the rest of the leaders about some of the reality of what this really is, the stewardship of people's lives and the stewardship of the business really means.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Jeff Bezos or a Bill Gates, so can't speak for them, but I do think for a CEO to be successful in a people industry, in any people industry, one of the first things you got to take out is that glamour aspect. It's easy to fall into it. It's easy to get comfortable sitting in my desk right now. But that when you feel those periods of comfort is probably a sign. I know it's a sign for me when, hey, you got to get up and feel the pulse of the organization, know what's actually happening in the organization. COVID was a great humbler. It was humbling for me as a CEO of an organization in COVID to have to go buy supplies in gas stations, to have to go buy cans of Lysol. I was just meeting with a supplier today and we had a good laugh. I showed him the receipt that I still have in my desk here of $25 cans of Lysol that I'm driving around to gas stations to get, because we had nothing. We literally did not have them. And that kind of brings you down to earth. And I think bringing you down to earth brings you on your staff's level, brings that level of humility with you. And I think employees want to be led by a humble leader, by humble organizations. So, I mean, the glamour and the glitz is nice, but it certainly should not be something that is comforting to you. Because I think if you are feeling glamorous and living glamorous and your employees are living in less than proper conditions, I define that as almost like a caste-like system. And I don't want to lead a caste system. I want to lead a system where employees want to come to work every day, want to work hard every day, not for me, not because of me, but I don't want to be an impediment to doing that. I don't want to be the one that makes someone wake up in the morning and say, oh my gosh, I do not want to go to work for that jerk. And that, that brings me down. That as well as a awesome family and an awesome wife who, if I even feel like being that way, rarely humbles me quickly and brings me down to earth. So that's kind of my view on it. It's almost not humbling to say it, but I just think that, the glamour the glitz and glamour is not, it's not appealing to your employees. It's not appealing to your workforce. It may be appealing to you and your friends, but it's not appealing to your workforce.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for that, Deke. Just as a when is your book coming out, or is it already out?
My book is out. My book was released last November. It had quickly become an Amazon bestseller. It is about COVID and my organization and my staff's experience. It's called Brush Fire, COVID-19 and on nursing homes. You could get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Every dime of the proceeds of the book are donated to our frontline employees and their education fund. So it's not a profit venture, but it is simply, or was simply, my way of showing my staff or letting them know that, hey, I understand. I may not be able to do as much as I want to do, but I've documented what they have been through in the last 2 years. And hopefully this is something that would live on for that reason, if alone only for that reason.
Right. Thank you so much, Deke.
Soyini, for facilitating a fantastic conversation with Deek. And Deek, thank you for sharing your conscious leadership journey with our community. The elements of humility and action and making difficult choices in what for your industry, I can only imagine, and you so clearly articulated, was probably one of the most difficult times for your industry in recent history. I do want to mention to attendees, we have a couple minutes for Q&A. If you would like to ask a question of Deek, or Shannon has also joined us again, please add your question to the Q&A box down below. You can find that in the lower portion of the Zoom interface. But Deek, I'm going to jump in with a question from Eric Moss. And he asks, what advice do you have for companies who wish to support the mental health and mental wellness of every employee?
Yeah, so I could tell you what we've done. We've doubled up on our employee assistance resources specifically related to mental health. So we met with we already had, of course, an EAP program. We met with an additional company that specifically deals in the mental health realm. We told them about a bit about the culture of our organization, and we tried to set up specific tailor-made programs which our employees could take use of if they want to. I will be honest and tell you that we have not had the engagement that I thought we would. Enough employees wanting to take advantage of those. What I'm told is that is typical. And I'll go back to my point again about just keeping your ears close to what's happening on the ground, because a lot of times most times, people aren't going to come out and tell you, hey, this is an issue they're dealing with. I share openly with my staff that during COVID, 2 things kept me sane. One was writing this book, because I was an insomniac. I could not sleep, and I channeled it to that. And the other thing was I was receiving counseling during COVID, which was the most refreshing thing. Every Wednesday at lunchtime, we had a virtual call for an hour, and it helped me. So I think sharing that openly also, or sharing your experiences openly with staff, also would encourage them that, hey, if I could do it, if the CEO could do it, then they can as well.
I love that. Can I weigh in as well with Deek on that one? That's Deek. So Deek, thank you so much. What an amazing conversation. And, your humility and vulnerability is really, truly been inspirational for us, but also for those who are watching. And I think you completely hit on it with the folks that we're working with. Conscious leadership, the mental health and the physical health issues. Absolutely. We have a lot of folks that are struggling with taking advantage of some of those great resources that their companies are bringing in. Sometimes it's because they can't find the time, those kinds of things. But the best thing we can do as a conscious leader is exactly what you're saying, which is to engage, be vulnerable, be open to the conversation, recognize when people are struggling, and help them at an individual level. paying more attention. To be a leader with courage and compassion is what it takes to deal with these mental health issues. And there's some really great research around the conversation, though, that you've got to be willing to openly talk about the fact that mental health is a challenge right now, and that it is something that we have to work at. And we all need help, regardless of what level we're at. So thank you. That's a great best practice.
Thank you. And actually, the next question sort of dovetails into some of the things that you've shared, Shannon. Tamilia is wondering, how are you able to engage the senior leadership team to be more aware of burnout of staff other than just providers? You touched on PTSD, and she believes that it's often overlooked in these times. So if you have a comment or two on that.
That's a good question, and it's been difficult. It's been especially difficult in our environment because when we identify burnout, we don't have staff. We are so struggling. So sometimes you identify burnout and you're afraid to, say anything because you need that individual, to come to work. I would say during COVID, we had for a very long time, standing daily call. And that's one of the things we discussed, and that's my leadership. That's one of the things we discussed on that standing daily call. The call moved to weekly. I'm actually not even on the call as much as I would like to now. I need to get back in that habit of being on the call. But we would identify things like that, and we would talk through, okay, we got to try to get this person some time off. How can we get someone from one of the other homes to go help them? Ironically and admittedly, that was one of the discussions I had with that person. That was on Friday. That's one of the things she was ticked off about, that she never takes time off. Not that she's applied for it, but that she's never takes much time off from work. And I said, that's probably leading to some of your additional frustration. So I hope that answers it. It was difficult. It was even difficult for my management team. We had to force members of our management team too. Because I'm like, you're not on the front lines, but of course similarly, they need time off for just mental relaxation. When I took my time off, it was I took a trip out of the country to Turks and Caicos. And I tell staff it was a cathartic moment. Just when I got off that plane, I didn't care about safety, COVID, anything. I just mentally released for the 3 or 4 days that I was there. And I thought about my staff. I'm like, oh my gosh, because I know most of them, obviously one wouldn't be able to go to the Turks and Caicos. But it was, for me, a cathartic experience for me.
Fantastic, thank you. And the final question is, what metrics, Deke, do you use internally to assess your adherence to conscious leadership? And is there anything, again, a tool or a resource that you use to identify opportunities for improvement?
I do not. So you may say if any tools are available. I do not. As most things, nursing home, we are very bad at collecting metrics on anything, even leadership metrics. So this is one area I certainly cannot advise the audience on.
Wonderful.
I can weigh in from a
I was going to, please, Shannon.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, there are a lot of tools out there, and Conscious Capitalism has some. There's some great articles and things with very specific measurements. But at the end of the day, it is about running your business as well. And so as a conscious business, as a conscious leader, you should see all of the normal metrics of success actually elevate. Raj's book, Firms of Endearment, shares how just the financial metrics were so much better than the Good to Great books or Good to Great companies. So you should see things like your employee engagement scores go up if you're doing things the right way. You should see things like your NPS, your net promoter referral scores go up. All those things, because if you're looking at your stakeholders, especially when you think about stakeholder and conscious leadership as well, but stakeholders, if you're asking for feedback from everyone, and I know Deke talked about, keeping the employees as a key stakeholder in this process. But if you're asking for feedback from all of your stakeholders, whether it's your customers, whether it's your community, whether it's your employees, all of those should rise as you are executing on being a conscious leader. I think those are the ones that we always look at a lot. It's just the key ones for the business.
Thank you. And I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. Soyini, if you want to join us just for a quick closing, thank you. Again, thank you everyone, our attendees, our speakers for joining us today. Kim from our team has dropped a brief survey into the chat. If you could just take 30 seconds or so to answer the question, it will help our future programming and the decisions we make around content. If you are new to Conscious Capitalism and joining us for the first time, please visit our website, consciouscapitalism.org. And if you are an executive implementing conscious practices into your business, we invite you to explore the growing support systems here at Conscious Capitalism by way of our Senior Leader Network. And again, you can find some more information about that on our website. Just a final announcement, on April 12th, we have our next virtual gathering, Becoming a Waymaker, Why Senior Leaders Must Clear the Way for Workplace Equity. Again, thank you to all of our speakers. Such an engaging conversation, Deek, for all of your practices of conscious leadership and your humility and the way that you engage with all of your stakeholders. And Soyini, thank you for moderating. And Shannon, appreciate you coming in for some additional context on some of those questions. So wishing everyone a fabulous rest of your day, and thanks again.